It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Breakfast, your knowledge-based property podcast here 7 days a week. And from all corners of the Australian housing market, lots going on up to a Thursday, September the 18th. And have you seen the new Charlie Sheen documentary on Netflix? Oh boy, this is something that really defies logic. I mean, how somebody can take that amount of drugs and live to tell the story is anybody's guess. It's compelling to watch because of all the warts and all, his account on what happened back in the day. He isn't hiding anything. And if you've seen it, you know exactly what I'm talking about. He's very authentic, and the wives, they still talk about him, with affection. You can tell that they still love the guy, and that is despite him having put them through hell. But yeah, it is a must-watch from me. Now, for the second year in a row, Victoria has taken the title as the worst state for property investors. But that story might be shifting if you look at the numbers. A national PIPA survey shows that Melbourne led the country in investor sell-offs, with 22% offloading at least one property in the past year, and that is up from 18% in 2024. Brisbane wasn't too far behind at nearly 20%, and Perth cracked the top three, with investors selling off some of their property. And that does lead us quite nicely into our next talking piece, and that is about granny flats and what is happening in that space. Let's catch up with Nicola Powell. She is Domain's Chief of Research and Economics. And a very good morning. Welcome back to the Real Estate Podcast, Nicola. Granny flats, They're having their moment in the sun at the moment. Plenty of granny flat searching going on all over the place.
That is absolutely true, and a very good morning to you too. But what we have seen is an increase in people searching for granny flat. In Sydney, it is now the number one search term. So normally the number one search term is actually pool, but pool has been knocked off of that top spot and it's now been taken by granny flat. And some of the other capital cities are also seeing granny flat reach into their top 10 search terms for this spring. In Brisbane, it came in as the seventh search term, most frequent search term. In Adelaide, it was at number 9, and in Perth, it was number 2. Didn't actually make the top 10, interestingly, in Melbourne. Didn't even make the top 20 in Melbourne. But other capital cities, it's certainly rising through the ranks.
Now, why is that happening? Well, it's got everything to do with affordability. That is driving the search behaviour. Buyers are increasingly prioritising affordability and flexibility, as you guys have reported as of today, because this big report is out, and it makes sense, obviously. I mean, just the way that the cost of the market is, granny flats, they stack up.
It does, and I think it's not surprising that Sydney's really leading the way in terms of search terms from buyers looking for a granny flat. We know that Sydney is the most unaffordable capital city, and I think that those affordability pressures are really shifting buyer preferences. I think there's other things as well. I think, and it does still feed into affordability, but an increase in multigenerational living, demographic shifts is probably also helping to increase demand towards granny flats. We've got adult children living at home for longer, but also the flip scenario as well, with older parents moving back in and us caring for our aging parents. So I think, when you're looking for a home that also has a granny flat, you're seeking that flexibility, self-contained spaces. And I think what we're reimagining is actually what we want from our homes. But I do think there's other things. Planning and policy also has factored in here. I think what we've seen over many years is states and councils have eased secondary dwelling approvals, which I think in essence does help to normalise having a granny flat. So it's making it a more of a mainstream housing solution. It's much easier today to add a granny flat in the back garden than it was, 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah, the multi-generational that you're talking about, that is obviously a standout feature of your report, which has just dropped this morning. Let's have a look at Adelaide, because what's happening there with the searching for stamp duty?
This is a really unusual search term. And so Adelaide at number 8 had stamp duty in its search terms. Now, I do think this is probably buyers out there looking for those incentives where stamp duty is perhaps exempt from particular properties. There has been some stamp duty changes occurring across Adelaide, which also might be factoring into this. For me as well, it does pull it back to affordability. I think we know that stamp duty is a massive disincentive to move. It's a massive hurdle for a first home buyer to pay stamp duty. It really does illustrate as buyers are trying to find those homes that are stamp duty exempt.
Yeah, indeed. And lifestyle, we should talk about that because, well, it still matters. People are chasing the lifestyle despite the financial pressures. You guys say that lifestyle remains a top priority.
Lifestyle absolutely does. I think, Australians really are driven by lifestyle. And what you tend to find in search terms, there are many lifestyle aspects to those search terms. So these are things like view, waterfront, but also pool. Pool is still in the top 10 across most of our capital cities. Those lifestyle additions, the location of the property is really poignant for buyers out there. Location is everything. We know that it's king in terms of buying property.
And are the buyers realistically adjusting their expectations? What in your report is suggesting that that's happening?
So what we had a look at across our different capital cities is what is the most frequent property type combination that people are searching for, or buyers are searching for, and what is that price point? And across our different capital cities, it did reveal some interesting trends. If we take Sydney as an example, the most frequent combination was a house with 3 bedrooms at a price of 1.7 million. What we found is the second most prominent search was a house with 2 bedrooms, but at 1.5 million. People are willing to notch down and lose a bedroom, but stay with a detached house. I thought what was also interesting in some of those different capital cities is the price point. So in Sydney, we found that the median search price at 1.5 million was the same for a 2-bed house as it was for a 3-bed townhouse. That demonstrates that I do think that buyers out there are shifting their priorities in order to perhaps get more bedrooms, get a larger footprint within their home, but they're foregoing perhaps that extra space, which is the garden.
We are talking to Nicola Powell. She is Domain's Chief of Research and Economics. When we come back, I want to ask Nicola how she is going to view the rest of the year. We've got another rate reduction, fingers crossed, coming up, and how that all is going to balance out as we look towards 2026. Dare I say that? We're back after this.
If you're a new listener, welcome. We talk to the most knowledgeable real estate experts across Australia every day from 6 a.m.
And right now it is time for another property tip. Recently we were talking to Matt Johnson in Cronulla, and good morning to you, Matt. You've got a property tip for everybody out there this morning.
Yes, my property tip would be if you're looking to purchase a large block of land for development or to build your future home, I'd always recommend speaking with the solicitor to make sure they do the right searches on the property to make sure you can, one, either develop the property, depending on the zoning. Now, if there is a caveat, for example, we had a property for sale, which was a waterfront property. They had a caveat over the home, being the neighbour behind, that they couldn't build 2 stories on this waterfront to block the neighbour's view. The people who were looking to purchase it did want to put an extension on there, so if they went ahead with the purchase, they wouldn't have been able to put their second story on. So always make sure you get the right advice from your solicitors and reviewed contract.
That is a very, very good tip. These caveats can absolutely turn everything into custard. So thank you for that, Matt. Well spotted.
Appreciate your time. Thank you, Craig.
Decode the property market with insider knowledge and insights to better navigate your real estate journey.
And it is a Real Estate Thursday. Nicola is with us talking all things granny flats this morning, but I also want to pick your brain and sort of ask you that question, how you view, the rest of the year? We've got another rate cut coming. What do you reckon? Looking into that rose-tinted glasses of yours.
Look, I think that we have seen the market build momentum, particularly over those winter months, which we know tends to be a quieter time of year. What we have got, clearance rates have been rising. Clearance rates are a really good barometer of between buyer and seller alignment, and particularly between buyer sentiment. And when we look at some of our markets, we've saw Sydney clearance rates overall for August hit 72%. And in Melbourne, they hit almost 70%. They were just below 70%. But this is like the highest clearance rates we've seen in these two capital cities since mid-2023. But the key thing is we've got consistent improvement in clearance rates. And even those early weekends in spring so far, we have seen some healthy clearance rates. So what our expectations are is we're seeing that momentum come back. We're seeing that buyers have got that renewed confidence. But we have to remember it's still quite an undersupplied market. And I think what we're expecting prices to continue to rise. We're expecting momentum, which means that we're expecting to rise faster than what they were earlier in the year. And as you rightly said, we are expecting another rate cut from the RBA. We are expecting our money is on a rate cut to be delivered in November. So I think this is really helping to provide that renewed confidence for buyers.
It's quite interesting with the prices and the way that they go up. You kind of forget just how much of a creep that accumulates. And in particular to yesterday, we were talking about the Adelaide market. And if you go back to 2020, as we highlighted, you could buy a house for 492 grand. Now it's 925,000. That is just in 5 years. And yeah, it's happening all the time. Once again, we're in this second sort of wave of this creeping. The prices are going up and up and up. And you look back and suddenly, wow, look at that. It's doubled.
And that's where you get that feeling of missing out. And, people really do get nervous and they get caught away as well when the market starts to really build momentum. And I think it's really important to be firm on what your price point is and really to bake in a buffer so you don't financially overextend yourself. We do have prices rising and you rightly made a point there that we have seen extraordinary rates of price growth, particularly in markets like Adelaide over a 5-year period. 80% increases in price is a significant change in affordability and price point. And it really confirms why Australians really do view property as a way to build financial wealth and prosperity. Because when you're seeing, an 80% increase in a 5-year period, the numbers really don't lie. But I think what our expectation is, prices will rise, but I don't think we're going to see extreme rates of price growth that we saw, particularly in that peak of that pandemic period. I think that affordability, in essence, will help to hold back that price growth. We'll still see them rise, but I would be very surprised if we see double-digit price growth start to unravel across our cities.
Nicola, always great to chat. All things property around Australia. Enjoy your Thursday, and thanks again for coming back on to the Real Estate Breakfast this morning.
Thanks so much for having me.
It's the Real Estate Podcast, talking properties from 6 a.m. every day from every corner of the Australian real estate market.
Yeah, so St Mary's at the moment is a booming suburb for Western Sydney, more just due to affordability. Most of the people buying in St Mary's are young families or young couples hoping to enter the market and buy the first property. Medium house prices in St Mary's are around $1 million. Units are around 450,000, but townhouses at the moment, which is the hot stock, around 800,000.
We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.